Fellas, it is finally the moment a lot of us senseis have been waiting for. Blue Archive's 3.5 anniversary is at long last arriving to BA Global in this week's update this Thursday, and with it comes the new and much anticipated 3.5 Fest units, Armed Hoshino and Shiroko Terra. For this video, I will mainly be reviewing Armed Hoshino, while Shiroko Terra will be reviewed in a separate video, which should hopefully be uploaded 1 to 2 days after this video is released. So, without further ado, here is a short review of Armed Hoshino. Hoshino bros, you guys must surely be elated, cause our cute locked-in OG-san, who is no longer Nemui or Atsui, has finally arrived, and I have to say, I'm in love with her design. Some of you might think that it's a bit too basic, and while I can understand the sentiment, for me, I'm actually a huge fan of her new military look cause it is so damn cool. For one, I really like the bulletproof vest that she's wearing, especially the pistol holster attached to it. Plus, I like that we can see the bullets and other intricate details behind Iron Horus, her shield. And there is also other detailed stuff in her design that I appreciate, such as the gloves that she's wearing and her vest's realistic look. Finally, the fact that her hair is in a ponytail, which is one of my favorite hairstyles, is a huge bonus too. And personally, I actually prefer ponytail Hoshino over her standard loose long hair, cause I think she looks both cuter and cooler. All in all, while I'm not exactly a military enthusiast, I'm still a huge fan of Armed Hoshino's design, as I think it's such a breath of fresh air over the swimsuits and other costumes that we usually get, and it's a great fit for Blue Archive's military aspect. Other than that, another thing that enhances my fondness for Armed Hoshino are her voice lines. Not only does she sound way cooler and reminiscent of her younger self with her deeper and more serious voice,
男装よし、チャンバーよし。そこどいて。どかないなら、撃つ。
but her short and direct voice lines, especially in battle, is so goddamn badass. And it clearly shows that she's locked in, ready to do anything for her loved ones. Also, her animations are god tier. For instance, her battle entrance, her DPS versions EX and basic skill animations. Remember kids, using your secondary while reloading your primary is faster than just swapping to your secondary. Her cafe furniture interaction, and so on. Overall, I'm digging her design, voice lines and animations, plus they are the reasons why I'm personally prioritizing pulling her over Shiroko Terra. Alright, enough gushing. What kind of student is Armed Hoshino? Well, she certainly is unique as she is the first student to have two combat styles, tank form and DPS form, with each stance having their own unique skills and stats. Both forms are Mystic with heavy armor, and they also share the same terrain moods. A combat power in urban terrains, S combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. The equipment she uses in both forms, hat, bag and watch, are also the same, with the bag improving the tank version's survivability, while the hat and watch being more beneficial for her DPS form. You can also freely switch between both stances in the team selection menu. Now, let's take a look at her skills. Starting with her tank form, Armed Hoshino has a 4-cost EX which makes her go Paradis, you filthy casual, allowing her to reposition to a designated location, and raising a shield that acts as a cover, gaining the cover state, while increasing her own attack for 40 seconds. Plus this cover shares a defense type, and its health is equal to a percentage of Hoshino's max HP. For her basic skill, she puts on a bulletproof plate every 40 seconds which reduces all incoming damage, with this effect being removed after receiving 25 hits. Her enhanced skill increases her attack and max HP, and with her sub-skill, her attacks have a fixed 20% chance of reducing the enemy's defense for 20 seconds, with a 5-second cooldown between every activation. In this form, her enhanced skill plus at UA 40 grants her extra attack and max HP, and her field combat power is upgraded from S to SS at UA 50. As for her DPS version, her new 6-cost EX turns her into to John Wick, dealing damage to one enemy, then subsequently inflicting additional damage to surrounding enemies in a circular area around the first target. Her basic skill lets her deal damage to one enemy whenever she runs out of ammo. Her enhanced skill boosts her normal attack range and crit damage, and with her sub skill, all her attacks ignore a percentage of the enemy's defense, and her attack is increased as well. Also, whenever she procs her EX or basic skill, she immediately reloads, and her next normal attack will deal increased damage to enemies in a fan-shaped area. At UE 40, she gains additional attack on her enhanced skill plus, and at UE 50, her field combat power is once again improved from S to SS. One more important thing to note is that skill levels are shared between both forms. So for example, if you level up her tank form's EX to level 5, her DPS forms will also become level 5. So you don't need to upgrade both version skills separately, and you only need to do it once. So, how strong is Armed Hoshino? Well, she is the first student to possess the unique mechanic of having two forms, tank and DPS, being able to freely switch between them before battle, plus each one has its own distinct skill stats and uses, making her somewhat complicated to utilize and understand since she is essentially two students in one. Starting with a tank stance, Armed Hoshino becomes one of the best and most durable tanks in the game, as she gains a ton of HP and defense in this form, even boasting the highest defense stat among all the students in the game. This is mainly due to her equipment, such as a tier 9 bag which grants her a lot more HP and defense, as well as her defensive kit. In regards to her skills, for starters, her EX is pretty special, as she generates a rage shield around herself that acts as a tough portable cover, and she obtains the cover status. This cover is extremely durable, gaining up to 69.1% of Hoshino's max HP at max level skill, plus it has no time limit, being removed only when it gets destroyed. It is also pretty cheap at 4 costs, and it actually inherits Hoshino's heavy armor, meaning it takes less damage from mystic and sonic attacks but 2 times damage from piercing, making it less effective against enemies with this attack type. So how does it work? Well, again, when activating her EX, she summons a cover in the form of a shield around herself, and she is considered as being behind cover. If you're still confused, think of a shield like other students' covers, such as Swimsuit Memori's umbrella and Shizuko's shack, with the only difference being that Hoshino's cover is portable since she's a striker, plus the shield is around her, and you can actually keep track of its health as indicated by this icon next to her health bar. Thus, similar to how normal covers work, her shield has a chance of blocking incoming attacks, completely nullifying any damage she takes if it does, with it being the one that receives the damage, so you can technically think of a cover as a second health pool, cause its health will decrease, not Armed Hoshino's. Also, again, the shield only has a chance of blocking attacks, and Hoshino can still get hurt if it doesn't, so she isn't exactly invulnerable in this state. Not only that, her terrain moods will also affect her cover's effectiveness, cause remember, terrain mood not only increases/decreases your student's damage, it influences their block rate when taking cover as well, i.e. better terrain mood means the higher the chances of the cover blocking the damage. In Armed Hoshino's case, her cover is most effective in field terrains since it has a 60% chance of blocking damage due to her S combat power, and at UA 50, with her SS combat power, this chance is boosted to 75%, further improving its ability to protect her. Another important thing to note is that her shield isn't a traditional barrier like track Yuka's. It doesn't have a blue health bar, rather it is a cover in the form of a shield, so don't mix them up, they are two different things, though you can still stack a cover and a normal barrier together to significantly increase her survivability. Other than that, when using her EX, she repositions herself to a certain location, and the range at which she can repo is actually quite wide, though she can get stopped by obstacles since she travels along the ground. Hence, her extremely useful EX is the core reason why she is one of the best tanks in the game, as her durable cover not only greatly improves her survivability by being able to block the enemy's attacks, but due to her ability to reposition herself, she can easily move in front of the enemy's attack to block it, preventing your other students from getting hurt. One last thing about her EX, she increases her attack by a massive 156% at max level skill for the lengthy duration of 40 seconds. So even as a tank, her personal damage can be quite decent. Moving on, her basic skill further improves her tanking capabilities. As at level 10 skill, she reduces all incoming damage by 24.1% with her bulletproof vest, and while it only activates every 40 seconds, which is kinda long, it also has no time limit. Instead, this effect is only removed once Hoshino receives 25 instances of damage. And missed or blocked attacks do not count as they actually need to hit her, so her EX can actually help to extend this effect by blocking attacks. Against certain ones that don't launch many attacks / are slow attackers, this skill is more effective, and it may even last for almost the entire battle cause they can't reach the threshold by the time she reactivates this skill. Aside from that, her sub-skill is also very useful, as her attacks have a fixed 20% chance of applying a 19.3% defense down debuff at max level skill, and it technically has a 100% uptime since it lasts for a decent amount of time at 20 seconds, and has a really short 5-second cooldown. Lastly, her enhanced skill increases her max HP and attack, with the former being useful cause it improves her cover's health, and her enhanced skill plus further boosts these two stats, giving her a bit more personal damage and more importantly, making her cover way more durable. Time to look at her DPS version. This form is exceptionally powerful as it converts her into one of the strongest blue AoE damage dealers in the game, being able to dish out tons and tons of damage as a result of her powerful offensive kit. Also, while her HP and defense are significantly lower compared to her tank form, her attack and crit damage stats are way higher. Looking at her kit, for starters, she has a really powerful AoE damage dealing EX skill that's also capable of dishing out single target damage. With it, she first launches a single target attack that has a multiplier of 149% at max level EX. Then she subsequently deals big AoE damage to enemies around the first target, with this attack having a 503% multiplier. While her EX's values might seem quite low, it can actually deal tons of damage due to her high offensive stats as well as a sub skill. More on that in a bit. Not to mention, by buffing her with units like Ako Himari and Kamhare, it becomes even more powerful. Again, even though this skill has both single target and AoE properties, her EX is counted as an AoE attack, especially since the brunt of its damage lies in the subsequent AoE explosions. Hence, you'd ideally buff her when she's firing off the single target shots, cause you'd preferably want her AoE to deal a lot of damage. However, her EX is very expensive at 6 costs, so you'd have to pair her with cost-cutting units to reduce this burden. Plus, even though its radius is fairly wide, you aren't able to freely move it around and you must specify a target, which can be quite troublesome since it's not as flexible and you need to ensure the enemy is in a suitable position so that her AoE can hit more enemies. Next, her basic skill is also pretty strong, being able to deal good single target damage with its 400% multiplier at max level skill, and it is quite unique since it doesn't trigger on a timer, rather it procs whenever she runs out of quick loading ammo. Specifically, she uses this skill around every 5 normal attacks, since one consumes 6 bullets and she has a mag count of 30. Hence, attack speed buffs would greatly benefit her cause she dish out more normal attacks, letting her run out of ammo quicker, leading to faster and more frequent basic skill activations. Moving on, her enhanced skill increases her crit damage, adding to her offensive capabilities, and her improved normal attack range allows her to stay further back in a safer spot, somewhere behind the tank. Plus, her UE40 is also worth it since she gains more attack, increasing her damage output. Finally, we have her sub skill, which is the main appeal of her kit, and it's one of the core contributors to her overwhelming firepower. Not only does it provide her with a permanent 14% attack boost at level 10 skill, but it also allows all her attacks, from her EX to her basic and even her normal attacks, to ignore the enemy's defense by a whopping 85%, turning her into an absolute monster against blue armored enemies with moderate to high defense, as she can shred through them really really easily. Other than that, her sub-skill has another important feature. Whenever she uses her EX or basic, she automatically reloads, and her first normal attack becomes enhanced, dealing 150% damage at max level skill in a fan-shaped area, giving her another powerful AoE damage outlet, consequently making her an even stronger blue AoE DPS unit. Thus, combine this with her basic skill's nature of proccing whenever she reloads, she can be pretty complicated to utilize effectively since you need to time her skills right, especially her EX. Overall, Armed Hoshino's DPS form may be a bit complex to understand and use, but nevertheless, she is an extremely strong blue AoE damage dealer who can ignore a large chunk of the enemy's defense, and combine this with her high offensive stats, EX skill, and enhanced normal attack, she is able to easily delete groups of blue mobs. You're still with me? Good, cause there's still more as we come to her users. While both forms are competent in their own right, Armed Hoshino's tank stance is much more flexible, as she can technically be used in a bunch more content, including regular ones like mission and event stages, whereas her DPS form is only really usually employed against blue armored enemies. In terms of endgame content, starting with DPS A Hoshino, while you can use her in stuff like event challenges and certain joint firing drills, she has become an essential unit for few Pararodzilla, being brought into most Sensei's teams as she is able to ignore 85% of Pararos and his minions' exorbitant defense, allowing her to deal massive AoE damage, and she can even knock down all the minions with a single EX use. Plus, when he spits out the tiny Pararos, her EX can literally hit all of them, thus inflicting massive damage to the big chicken. Not only that, her amazing combat power in this terrain will serve to further improve her damage, though her A combat power should still make her effective in indoor Pararodzilla. She takes less damage from his mystic attacks, plus you also need to use someone like Uwe in order to cut her heavy 6 cost down to 3, as well as hyper buffers in order for her damage output to go through the roof. Thus, this has resulted in many senseis having at least DPS A Hoshino in their team, with some players also managing to clear Torment Pararodzilla with only one team. In fact, when she first released in JP, completing this raid on Torment didn't guarantee top 20k, aka Platinum, with everyone and their damn mother using her in their teams, as she makes this raid much simpler to finish. Other than that, she also saw a lot of use in Blue Kurokage. Similar to Pararodzilla, A Hoshino is able to deal tons of AoE damage to the dog and his multiple fragments, primarily with her EX, cause she can ignore most of their exorbitant defense, hence many senseis opted to use her in their blue insane teams. Aside from these two raids, she was also utilized quite a bit in Blue Armored Field Cheese Phase 1, where her role was to destroy the blue minions with her EX and enhanced normal attack. Finally, while she isn't exactly suitable for Blue Bina, since this raid mainly requires single target DPS units, as proven in the previous Urban Bina GA in JP, where the Shiroko Terror plus Wakamo plus Defense debuffers combo was favored especially on Insane, you might still be able to use her as a solid DPS option for one of your Torment teams in the future, since she can ignore up to 85% of his high defense. Time for her tank version. First off, one of Tank A Hoshino's best users lies in Shirokuro, specifically on Torment difficulty, though you can still use her on Insane and below if you need to. And in particular, she is mainly brought into Phase 1 against Shiro. This is because as the strongest cover student in the game, with her EX, she is able to repull herself in front of Shiro's giant snowballs, deflecting them back at him and inflicting tons of damage while increasing his groggy gauge. Not to mention, since she is the first striker cover unit, using her would free up space in the special slot for other more important units like hyper buffers, unlike before when you had to use one of these special cover students. However, since her cover inherits Hoshino's yellow armor, it would take 2 times damage from Shiro's piercing attacks, which is why she needs to be at a suitable level in order for her shield to actually repel these snowballs. Otherwise, she can be instantly killed. Specifically, it would seem that she needs to be minimum UE 30 to deflect Shiro's snowballs, though you also have to consider other factors like bond level and equipment. So just to be safe, you'd want her to be at least UE 40 cause the big additional HP boost provided by her enhanced skill plus would substantially increase her cover's health, allowing it to reflect these snowballs more comfortably. Not only that, as a tank, she also obviously has the general role of protecting your students from his hard-hitting attacks. through her cover, like his mini snowballs on the ground, though again, they can destroy her shield pretty easily since it takes double damage, so you have to constantly refresh it. Thus, all these have turned her into a vital unit for this boss, being brought into many players' torment teams, cause cover units are more important for this difficulty, and Hoshino being able to deflect the giant snowballs and tank the mini ones will greatly help in clearing this raid more smoothly, whereas for Insane and below, most players would typically just cheese the raid using hyper buffers and hyper carries without relying on the ball deflecting strat, though you can of course use her if you need to. Also again, she isn't as effective against Kuro, cause for this boss, you'd use repositioners like Track Yuka instead to move your team out of the way of the park rides, / use Neo Akari to block a number of them, but don't let this stop you from using her if needed, since she can still prevent 1 or 2 park rides from hitting your students. Another raid that Tank A Hoshino has seen a lot of use in is Gregorius, cause not only does she take less damage from his mystic attacks, but by moving her to a specific spot right at the start of battle, she is able to consistently plant the defense debuff from her sub-skill onto Greg himself until the battle ends. And by applying this debuff onto the main body, it would automatically be spread onto all choir members, plus it also helps in lowering his massive defense. This made the raid's debuff requirement mechanic much easier to manage, resulting in more clears even on Torment, as she was brought into a lot of teams, especially those formations using Dress Hina as the main hyper carry, though she doesn't exactly replace Mine in this raid since our Harmus's EX applies 2 AoE debuffs and her defense shred can stack on top of a Hoshino's. For other raids, she can theoretically be used in a bunch of them, acting as a tank to protect your students with a cover, though probably not against bosses with yellow attack. In terms of final restriction, she does see a bit of use instead. Despite the boss's high attack, especially on the harder floors, Hoshino can still somewhat withstand his powerful hits, though she isn't used as often in this raid, with other striker units being the priority. On the other hand, she has turned into an absolutely essential unit for the new final restriction boss, Chokma. One of the core mechanics for this boss is using covers to block some of his attacks, as they take less damage and prevent your team from getting hurt. Thus, being the best cover student in the game by far, Tank Hoshino has become the primary cover unit for this boss, alongside Swimsuit Kirino, being utilized on almost all floors, especially the higher ones. This is because her shield is way more durable compared to the other cover students, plus Chokma's passive skill prevents students from taking cover, but effects that directly grant a cover status are still permitted, with Armed Hoshino being the only one so far who can do so, making her even more significant. Like I mentioned, her role in the team will be to block a number of Chokma's attacks, such as his 20 fireball attack that he launches in a straight line, so you have to reposition her directly in front of Chokma's mouth to block the fireballs, since they won't be able to pass through and they only deal 8% damage to cover. His 2 giant steel wheels that target the ballistas whenever his health drops below 85%, which are used to put Chokma into the groggy state, especially once he has 3 unstable flame stacks, massively increasing the damage he receives. So you will need to repo a Hoshino into the path of one of the wheels and place Swimsuit Kirino in front of the other so that they can block them, saving the ballistas from getting destroyed. Oh, he also destroys all currently deployed cover before unleashing this attack, so remember to use the EXs at the right time. And finally, his flamethrower attack in phase 2 that continuously inflicts 50% damage in a fan-shaped area, though it cannot pass through cover, while dealing only 3% damage to it. So you would repo her in front of your students to block parts of his fire attack and prevent your other students from getting injured. Chokma also carries out this attack for the entirety of phase 2, so your Hoshino has to be at a high enough level to tank this attack for a longer period, and you need to defeat him ASAP before her cover gets destroyed and your team gets wiped, or before the timer runs out. In conclusion, should you pull for a Hoshino? Well, I would personally classify her as a must-pull unit, cause not only is she the first student to have 2 forms that you can freely switch between before battle, but both stances are extremely strong too with their own skills and uses. Her offensive form is a powerful blue AoE damage dealer, whereas her defensive version is a highly durable tank. luck, mainly due to its sturdy cover. Hence, in my opinion, you should 100% pull for her since she will greatly aid you in clearing a lot of content more smoothly. And if possible, you should also go for at least UE40 if you can, since her DPS form's damage output increases and her tank form becomes even tankier. Plus remember, fast banners always have double drop rate for 3-star units. So this is a huge enough reason to pull, cause it's the perfect time to get more 3 stars, especially if you're a newer player. Not to mention, you will also be getting more Eligma from your pulls, so in case you don't get extra A Hoshino copies, you can just buy her a left from the shop. However, should you go for Armed Hoshino or Shiroko Terra? In my opinion, definitely go for both if you have the Paroxenes to do so. But if you're only able to pull for one of them, then I'd argue that you should prioritize Armed Hoshino instead, cause she is much more flexible due to having 2 forms. Unless of course you're pulling based off what you need / waifu reasons. Nevertheless, I would still personally recommend you try and pull for both of them if you can, cause they're both amazing in their own right, and fast units are typically a must-have anyways. Moreover, while you should also get Mika, especially if you don't have her, like maybe you're a new player, as she's the strongest piercing damage dealer in the game, remember that you have a chance of getting her as well as the other fast units from Armed Hoshino's and Kuroko's banners. So I'd say pull on either one of those 2 banners instead of her owns and pray to the RNG gods. Though of course, the decision is yours to make. Also, do remember that Swimsuit Aries comes a week after the fast banners and Kisaki is in 2 months. So it's up to you to decide whether to spark or stop early as long as you get both Arm Hoshino and Shiroko Terra. And that's all for this week's review. Again, a small reminder that I will be reviewing Shiroko Terra in a separate video, which should hopefully be released a day or 2 after this video is out. I'll leave the link to it in the pinned comment once I've uploaded it. Anyways, that's all from me. Let me know who you're pulling for if you are. Good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.